Hello, my name is Joshua Mugabe. I welcome you to Evolution, Origin of Life. How old is the Earth? It is believed that the Earth is approximately 4.5 billion years old. How old is the universe? From analysis of data collected by Hubble telescope, the age of the universe is estimated to be about 12 billion years. When did life appear on Earth? It is estimated that life on Earth emerged about 3.5 billion years ago. Thus, 1 billion years after the formation of the planet. Historically, how has the origin of life on Earth been explained? The most recurrent explanation for the phenomenon of life on Earth is mythological. People from various parts of the world have developed explanatory myths about the origin of animals and human beings. Some of these myths were incorporated into religions, and almost all religions have metaphorical or transcendental explanation about the origin of life on the planet. With the development of science, new explanatory attempts have emerged. Notable among them are the spontaneous generation hypothesis, abiogenesis that asserts that living beings were created from non-living material, the cosmic panspermia hypothesis, theory that life on Earth is a result of seeding from the outer space. The autotrophic hypothesis, according to which the first living beings were autotrophs. The heterotrophic hypothesis, the most acceptable nowadays, that affirms that life emerged from heterotrophic cells. At the end of the 1980s decade, a new hypothesis known as RNA world hypothesis was presented. This hypothesis asserts that primitive life had only RNA as genetic material and as structure molecule that later turned into DNA and proteins. RNA world hypothesis is strengthened by the fact that RNA can play a catalytic role, like enzymes, and by finding that some bacteria have ribosomes made only of RNA without associated proteins. What is the spontaneous generation hypothesis? The spontaneous generation hypothesis, or abiogenesis, asserts that life on Earth came from non-living materials. For example, the fact that with time rats appeared around West was considered in the past a confirmation of this hypothesis. Some supporters of spontaneous generation associated it with the existence of an active principle, the vital elan, that would be the source of life, a theory known as vitorism. How did the experiment of Reid and Pasteur refute the hypothesis of spontaneous generation? To refute the spontaneous generation hypothesis, many experiments were performed. Francisco Redi, in 1668, verified that maggots appeared on meat only when there was exposition to the environment. Within the closed environments, they did not appear. In 1862, Louis Pasteur, working with swan neck flasks, refuted the abiogenesis hypothesis definitively. In his experiment, Pasteur demonstrated that boiled nutritive soup put in swan neck flask did not contaminate with microorganisms, while the same soup with flasks with open upwards mouth were contaminated in a few days. The fact that both flasks were open refuted arguments of vitorists that the vital elan could not enter the flasks. Pasteur broke the swan necks of the flasks to demonstrate that proliferation of microorganisms could happen if the being were able to reach the broth. What is panspermia? Panspermia is a hypothesis that describes life on Earth as not originated from the planet. The idea is that the first living beings that colonized the Earth came from outer space, from other planets, or even other galaxies by traveling in meteors, comets, etc. According to this hypothesis, even the type of new of life now existent on Earth could have also been seeded intentionally by extraterrestrial beings in other stellar and planetary systems. What is the autotrophic hypothesis on the origin of life? The autotrophic hypothesis on the origin of life asserts that the first being on Earth were producers of their own food, just like plants and chemosynthetic microorganisms. What is the heterotrophic hypothesis of the origin of life? According to the heterotrophic hypothesis, the first living beings were very simple heterotrophic organisms, that is, not producers of their own food, which emerged from the gradual association of organic molecules into small organized structures, the conservates. The first organic molecules, in their turn, would have appeared from substances of the Earth's primitive atmosphere, submitted to strong electrical discharge, to solar radiation, and high temperatures. What is the most acceptable hypothesis about the origin of life on Earth? And how does it compare to other main hypotheses? The heterotrophic hypothesis is the strongest and most accepted hypothesis about the origin of life. The spontaneous generation hypothesis has been excluded by experiments by Pasteur. Panspermia hypothesis is not yet completely refuted, but it is not well accepted since it would be necessary to explain how living beings could survive long space journeys under conditions of extreme temperatures, as well as to clarify the manner by which they would resist high temperatures first when entering the Earth's atmosphere. The autotrophic hypothesis is weakened if one takes into account the production of organic material from inorganic substances is a highly complex process requiring diversified enzymatic systems and the existence of complex metabolic reactions on the primitive Earth were not probable. Before the emergence of life, what gases was the Earth's primitive atmosphere constituted? The Earth's primitive atmosphere was basically formed of methane, hydrogen, ammonia, and water vapor. What are the main constituents of the Earth's atmosphere in our time? The present atmosphere on Earth is constituted mainly of molecular nitrogen, molecular oxygen. Nitrogen is the most abundant gas, approximately 80% of the total volume. Oxygen makes up to 20%. Other gases in the atmosphere in a lower percentage. Of the great concern is the increase in the amount of carbon dioxide due to human activity, the cause of the threatening global warming. Was there molecular oxygen in the Earth's primitive atmosphere? How has the molecule become abundant? The presence of molecular oxygen in the primitive atmosphere was probably at minimal and extremely rare. Oxygen became abundant with the emergence of photosynthetic beings, approximately 1.5 billion years after the appearance of life on the planet. Which physical element contributed to the great amount of available energy on the primitive Earth at the time of the origin of life? $3.5 billion years ago, the water cycle was faster than today, resulting in hard storms with intense electrical discharges. There was also no chemical protection from the ozone layer against ultraviolet radiation. Temperatures in the atmosphere and on the planet's surface were very high. Electricity, radiation, and heat constituted a large variable energy sources. What was the experiment of Stanley Miller in 1953 on the origin of life? In 1953, Stanley Miller arranged an experimental apparatus that simulated the atmospheric condition of the primitive Earth. The experiment contained a mixture of methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and circulating water, and when heated was transformed into vapor. He submitted the mixture of continuous bombardment of electrical discharge, and after days he obtained a liquid residue within which he discovered organic molecules, among them, surprisingly, amino acid glycine and alanine, the most abundant constituents of proteins. Other researchers reproduced Miller's experiment and noted the formation of other organic molecules such as lipids, carbohydrates, and nucleotides. What are conservates? Conservates are small structures made of aggregation of organic molecules under water solution. By electrical attraction, molecules join into bigger and more organized particles, distinct from fluid environment, forming a membrane-like structure that separates the internal region of the conservates from their exterior. The conservates might divide themselves and also absorb and excrete substances. It is believed that these structures may have been the precursor of cells. How can conservates be formed of phospholipids or polypeptides? Phospholipids are amphipathic molecules, that is, they present polar portion and non-polar portion. In contact with water, these molecules tend to spontaneously unite and organize themselves, forming membranes that create a closed interior space, separated from the exterior environment. Polypeptide chains, in their turn, can attract water by electrical attraction, forming a surrounding water layer and also creating an organized structure with the limited interior space. How could conservates have facilitated the emergence of life on Earth? Conservates probably provide needed separation between the internal and external environment, and thus organic material within was not lost to the ocean. The enzymatic action inside the internal environment could develop in different manners, increasing the speed of specific chemical reactions. Conservates also allowed the molecular flux across its membranes to be selective. Since containing different molecules and different organized from each other, conservates could have promoted the competition for molecules from the environment, setting out an evolutionary selection. What is the evolutionary origin of the internal membranes, organelles of the cell? It is accepted that internal membranes, organelles of eukaryotic, like Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum, appeared from invagination of the external membrane of primitive cells. How have prokaryotic cells given origin to aerobic eukaryotic cells and to photosynthetic aerobic eukaryotic cells? According to the most accepted hypothesis, aerobic eukaryotic cell emerged from association of aerobic prokaryotes engulfed by primitive anaerobic eukaryotic cells. This would have been the origin of mitochondria that thus would have primitively been aerobic bacteria engulfed by eukaryotic anaerobes. This hypothesis is called endosymbiotic hypothesis on the origin of mitochondria. Chloroplasts could also have appeared by endosymbiosis from the entry of photosynthetic prokaryotes into aerobic eukaryotes, both establishing a mutualistic ecological interaction. What evidence strengthens the hypothesis that chloroplasts could have been photosynthetic prokaryotes and mitochondria could have been aerobic prokaryotes? The fact that chloroplasts are the organelle responsible for photosynthesis in plant lead to the supposition that before symbiosis, they were autotrophic prokaryotes. For the reason that mitochondria are the center of aerobic cellular respiration, the powerhouse of eukaryotic cell, it is supposed that they were once aerobic prokaryotes. The endosymbiosis hypothesis to explain the emergence of aerobic and autotrophic eukaryotic being is strengthened further by the following evidence. Chloroplasts, as well as mitochondria, have their own DNA, similar to bacteria DNA. Chloroplasts and bacteria, mitochondria, reproduce asexually by binary fission, like amoeba. Both organelles have ribosomes and synthesize proteins. How did the first fermenting autotrophs appear? What about the first aerobic beings? The heterotrophic hypothesis asserts that first living beings were fermenting heterotrophs. Fermentation released carbon dioxide, and then the atmosphere became enriched by this gas. By mutation and natural selection, organisms capable of using carbon dioxide and light to synthesize organic material appeared. There would have been the first photosynthetic being that were also fermenting being, since there was no abundance of oxygen. Sans photosynthesis is a reaction that releases molecular oxygen. With the emergence of fermenting autotrophs, this gas became available. Some organisms then developed aerobic respiration using oxygen, a highly efficient method to produce energy. Why is it more probable that photosynthetic prokaryotes appeared before aerobic eukaryotes? It is more probable that photosynthetic prokaryotes appeared before the aerobic eukaryotes because without photosynthesis, the Earth's atmosphere would not be enriched with molecular oxygen. Without oxygen, the existence of aerobic beings would not be possible. What is an argument that shows that emergence of photosynthetic being was crucial for life to reach the marine surface and later the dry land? Ultraviolet radiation from the sun was disallowed to reach the surface of the primitive Earth. Therefore, The development of life on dry land, even near the aquatic surface, was impracticable. Probably, the first living being lived submerged in deep water to avoid destruction by solar radiation. Only after the appearance of photosynthetic beings that later filling the atmosphere with oxygen released from them, the formation of photospheric ozone layer later filters the ultraviolet radiation as possible. Thank you very much for participating in Evolution, Origin of Life. Please do like, share, and subscribe.